Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of the Environmental Services and Regulation Policy Committee. Thank you all for coming. Hello to anybody watching at home. Let's start with a round of introductions, shall we? I've got a script here. The meeting today is open to the public, and we do not have any items that will require the public to be excluded from the meeting. The meeting will be webcast, and the recording will also be available for people to view later through the Council's website. We have received no petitions, public questions or statements, and no questions from members. So we must be doing an absolutely stellar job. Can I request mobile telephones, etc. are off or silent? There is no fire test planned for today. And let's have introductions. So as I said before, I'm Councillor Jolson, Chair of the Committee, and Liberal Democrat Member for Dawn Totley Ward, Mark.
Mark Rustling, Labour Councillor for Shire Green and Brightside and Deputy Chair.
David Barker, Councillor for Richmond Ward.
Mary Lee, Councillor for Darnell Ward.
Mark Jones, Councillor for Burngrave Ward.
Christine Gilligan, Councillor for Hillsborough Ward and spokesperson for this party, and may I also say Peter is on his way and he apologises if he's a bit late.
Sue Alston, Councillor for Fulwood Ward.
Thank you. And officers on either side.
Good morning, I'm Robert Parkin, Assistant Director for Legal Services.
Morning, Richard Eyre, Director of Streets and Regulations.
Morning, I'm Amanda Clayton from Democratic Services.
Thank you, everyone. So, apologies for absence. I'm not aware of any of us who've had an apology for lateness for Councillor Gilbert. Exclusion of press and public, there is none. Declarations of interest, are there any? And Councillor Gilbert is here, so that apology can be withdrawn. Seeing you sitting down, I'll introduce you for you. This is Councillor Peter Gilbert over there, member for Ecclesall. Declarations of interest, anybody? No declarations of interest. Minutes of the previous meeting on page 11 of the agenda pack. Can these be agreed as a correct record? Or are there any queries? Mark?
Minutes absolutely fine. It doesn't have to be now, but I think I saw it in there somewhere. Just on page 15 of the pack, it said there'll be new standard operating procedures for the environmental enforcement. So it'd be good to get an update of that by email, if that's easiest. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we do that, Richard? Yeah. Okay. Can I take those minutes as agreed? Take silence as the set of the meeting. Thank you. That's agreed. Item 5, public questions. There are none. Item 6, members' questions. There are none. Let's hold the work programme until after the next item, and so we'll go straight into item 8, the Amey Performance update. So we've allocated an hour for this. So I'm going to obviously ask. Welcome to the Amey people who've come to speak to us. I'll ask you to introduce yourselves and present for a little bit. What I will do, I think, in terms of managing members' questions, is just trying to get a sense of the issues we want to raise, rather than just going around members in turn, because I think that might be a more efficient way. So if you have a chance to think about it, you haven't already, the issues you want to raise with Amey, and we'll try and structure a discussion around that. So thank you very much. Over to you guys.
Thank you, Councillor Otten. My name is Peter Banfield. I'm the Business Director for the Sheffield PFI for Amey. I brought today some colleagues of mine from the team that directly manage some of the services that we'll be talking about today. So I'll hand over for introductions.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Peter Hancock. I'm Principal Operations Manager for Amey. I look after primarily improvements to the network and the resurfacing programme.
Good morning, I'm Emma Windle. I'm also Principal Operations Manager, and I look after everything that Pete doesn't look after, basically. So all the OPEX side, which are things like the things that need fixing, basically, and street cleansing.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Martin Toland. I work for the PFI project company, Amey Highways, liaise with the shareholders and the lenders to the project.
Good morning, I'm Mohammed Idrous. I'm Assistant Director for Highways.
We've developed a presentation intended to be about 10 minutes, just to give a quick overview of where we are from some specific questions that we were asked prior to today, and a couple of other bits. So we'll just run through that, and then happy to take open questions beyond that. So if we could move to the first slide, please. The overview of the state of the highway in terms of carriageways and footways status. We were here probably about 2 years ago at a committee where there was concern over an increasing number of carriageway defects and potholes. And we vowed at that time to undertake a more advanced programme. We were developing an asset management strategy halfway through the PFI. We've invested significantly in the core investment period in the first 5 years. We were embarking on a new asset management strategy, which coincided with about halfway through the contract, about how we manage the carriageways and footways from here on into the end of the contract in 2037. So at that time, as we say, the overall status of the network has predominantly been very good. The independent data analysis from the Department of Transport, every year they publish the road condition indices scores, and Sheffield is positioned in the top 2 or 3 in the country as an overall network. So a square area of roads, it was about 13.5 million square metres of road network and 6.5 million square metres of footway network. So the DFT publish independent data on the quality of every local authority network in the UK, and Sheffield is in the top 2 or 3 in the country and regularly has been. These graphs show the overarching position of Sheffield. Sheffield is in the light green, so on the right-hand graph, the left-hand graph is the condition of the A roads in Sheffield, and the right-hand graph is the B and C classifications of roads in Sheffield. So the light green is the Sheffield network, and you can see on the right-hand side, for example, a big spike at the start of the contract around 2013. So there was no prior information, no data at that point. But you can see a big decrease, and low is good on these graphs. So what this indicates is the percentage of network requiring...
If I could just stop you for a second, just to advise members that slides have been emailed around to you now, so you can see them on your laptops rather than to walk up to the screens and peer at them like we were doing a moment ago. Thank you.
Okay.
Please carry on.
So low is good. So what these are saying is that the Sheffield network requires circa 2% of roads requiring maintenance, and that's compared to a national average of 5 or 6%. So this is why Sheffield's overall network is in a very good position in the UK. But what we did vow was to address some of that historical backlog of potholes on the carriageway. So just go back one, Pete. So through 2024 and 25, on that new asset management strategy, we have delivered circa 750,000 square metres of additional surfacing, preventative maintenance surfacing, which is over and above the compliance that the contract requires. And those treatments have improved the overall status, and we expect in the future DFT surveys for the network position to be even better with this additional preventative maintenance being undertaken. And that really helps the overall condition and prevent potholes and defects from forming early. And we have seen a significant reduction in potholes through 2025 since undertaking that activity. And Pete will explain some of that direct intervention we've made. And there's also a marked reduction, backing up this evidence, in a significant reduction in third-party claims against Amey for this. So what we're seeing really is a real good, solid base of the overall network condition in Sheffield. So we just want to start with that, that sort of perception piece that Sheffield is right up there at the top of the rankings. So, I've got to click. Yeah. There we go. So this graph also, to back that up, the NHT surveys, that are an annual survey that go out from Sheffield each year to the public, again puts us in the top quartile of authorities as an independent measure again in terms of the specific questions asked there of the public are overarching condition or perception of the highway network, and we score very well again from independent data from the public. So that does back up that evidence from the DFT as well.
So you can see from these graphs here that we've had a steadily increasing position in terms of Cat 1 urgent potholes, quite steady from 2019 to 2022. We had quite a jump in 23 to 24, which is obviously the point where Peter was referring to, where this was raised and we committed to basically react to this worsening position. Now, what we did is we committed an extra 4 gangs on top of the existing 5 gangs to address these rising numbers. We actually laid 82,000 square metres of surfacing, which is roughly 50% of our requirement of resurfacing across the network on a yearly basis. So you can imagine it was a significant increase. And you can see on that lower graph the effect of it. So those dark blue bars are defects that have been found. The orange line is representing how many we've completed. So you can see that large uptick in 2024. And the green line is showing the underlying work stack, if you like, of defects. So you can see that's been a continuous drop throughout this period. So we are staying on top of the defects that are out there on the network very well. We expect this basically to run around this 2,000 mark. There's always an underlying amount of defects on a network, because you can imagine while we're repairing defects, we're also finding defects simultaneously. So there's always an element of defects that are live in a system. And we believe this is about right for what we'd expect on a network of this size.
I could just add to that as well some other data that's out in the public domain, published from the RAC. Our calculations indicate about 1.6 potholes per mile in Sheffield. That's backed up by an RAC survey that's been published, and that's comparing to a national average of 6 potholes per mile. So again, 1.6 in Sheffield versus a national average of 6. So we're really in a good place in terms of carriageway potholes. On top of that overall condition of the network of only circa 2% of all roads requiring maintenance, compared to the national average of at least 6%.
So this graph is detailing the claims that come against us as a highway authority. Now you can see there was an increase in 23. It was quite low in 2021, you can imagine, because of the effect of COVID. There was very few people out there on the network. But again, you can see that effect of increasing those resources, which pull down the overall numbers. I think it's also worthy of saying that in terms of claims, ultimately, they do progress to court, and our policies and our process are tested in court, and they're tested very robustly, and we tend to, we do not have problems in court because it is a robust system. It is a well thought out policy, and we work to that policy. So it is a very defendable position as a highway authority.
So moving on to one of the areas that I'm responsible for, grounds maintenance and horticulture. So we spray 3 times a year between the 1st of April and the 31st of October with glyphosate cyclically. And a new process has been set up fairly recently, working in collaboration with the street cleansing team, to use the mechanical sweepers with weed brushes. I've been in Amey around 6 months now, and one of the sort of issues I inherited was the complaints around spraying being done and then not clearing the weeds afterwards once they died off. So we've introduced a new mechanism for using the mechanical brooms to sweep up those weeds and make it look a lot better. The city centre and gateways are sprayed 4 times a year, and the dead weeds in the city centre are removed manually by the street cleansing team. There's also a reactive team that respond to customer complaints or issues that have been raised, and they go out within a short period of time, spray and then remove manually the dead weeds. Just move on to the next one. So, street cleansing, we have, like I said, I've been in Amey for around 6 months, and one of the first things that I was tasked to do was to change the way that we deliver the street cleansing service and to make it more efficient and more sort of effective. So we've looked at the staffing, we've looked at training, we've looked at the equipment that we've got, and we've made a number of changes. We started a couple of projects already. One is what we've called the Small Island project, which kind of speaks for itself. There's a cycle started on nights to clean the small islands. It's quite often difficult to get to them during the day because of traffic, and we would need to use traffic management if we were to do them during the day, so we have been doing them at night time. We're well into the second cycle now, and it's been very successful. We've also had a pilot island project as well, which is where we again undertaken by the night teams, and to address the pilot islands, but also pedestrian walkways, pedestrian crossings as well, where typically we get a build-up of waste. So that's been going again on nights for all of October and a bit in November as well. So again, another area that I spend a lot of time talking about is leaves, and we've brought the street cleansing and horticultural teams together, grounds maintenance team together, to work with each other to improve the leafing service that we provide. And that is on the go at the moment, and is again, early indications are that it's successful and it's much more efficient than it has been in previous years. The city centre continues to be best in class and was nominated for the best street cleansing team at the APSI Awards held in Glasgow in September. The team are continually work to strive to improve the service they provide, and always looking for areas to improve things. And we've got a couple of really exciting projects coming on board in the next few months as well, which should improve things further. We continue to develop and staff and to invest in staff, and we've got a programme of training our crews to drive Class 2 vehicles, which is the big sweepers, which allow us to have greater flexibility in between the teams.
So just touching on social value, Amey do a lot in the community around social value. Just some stats for 2025 so far. We've awarded nearly £6 million of opportunities to small and medium enterprises this year to date, and 417,000 of opportunities awarded to charities and social enterprises and voluntary organisations. We spent circa 183 hours on activities to raise environmental awareness, and over 400 hours spent on supporting volunteer litter picking. So they really assist us with our task, so we actively participate in a lot of those volunteering opportunities and supply equipment to those organisations. We've donated over £10,000 worth through recycled office furniture. We're just developing the Olive Grove site at the moment, so whether that's working with the local technology centre where students can actively take old wood from that site to use for their training, or as I say, recycling furniture to various groups out there. We've provided over 50 hours of mentoring through the Future Bound support with barriers to employment, and we continue to work and offer placements for students in Sheffield colleges through an internship programme and looking at ways to develop relationships with Freeman College and other similar support. We undertake what we call Journey to Work events at two sites, two events this year with DWP, the job centres in Sheffield, where we interact with the wider interested parties in trying to get unemployed groups to work. So we've seen some success with that. And all our staff are allowed 2 days of social impact volunteering days towards events in Sheffield. And we've carried out work at Sheffield Hospital's Christmas Tree Appeal, Pitsmore Adventure Playground, Bent Green allotments, and raised money for Sheffield Hospital's Dementia Appeal. And we've undertaken various sponsored walks, football tournaments, where we've raised money for those events. We were asked before today to talk about our highway reps. So these are roles within our teams that represent the 7 local area committees. So we just wanted to touch on what their roles and responsibilities are. So they undertake local liaison, the first point of contact for highway issues in your areas. They attend walkabouts, the local area committees and community meetings, and gather feedback and share updates. They're a point of contact for managing complaints and queries. So recently we've merged this service with our customer service team, and we've brought that under one senior manager. Before, we were maybe slightly disjointed in having them as a separate service. We've integrated them now as part of the customer service team, the same line management, so that can be a lot more focused going forwards. They provide timely updates on works, logistics and timelines to councillors and residents. In terms of how they support you guys as councillors, they should keep you informed about planned works, ongoing works, resolve resident concerns quickly and accurately, and they share data and trends to support ward level decision making. They offer a consistent link between councillors, communities and delivery teams and ensure high quality communication and proactive engagement. However, we recognise there's been some gaps in that service, and that team have been realigned with some specific training on what their roles are. So all those bits that I've just mentioned, I'm sure there's been gaps in that service, but some have performed better than others, I would say, and I would hope that you'd recognise that some provide that service, but there may be others that haven't. We're looking to align that so they all provide that service. So, as I say, we've brought that management under one single manager now, so that will enable us to do that. We're actively seeking feedback from Sheffield Council to work with us to do this, and we want to reach out to councillors to help us do that and what you'd like to see this team doing. We're introducing a new post of an area highways team leader position. So again, more management focus on what they're doing and performance of what they're doing. We want to undertake delivery of stakeholder engagement training, as I mentioned, better training for them of what our expectations collectively is of this role. And we're going to develop a councillor briefing pack for more major works. So again, what we want to do going forward is work with you and actually get the best out of this role. It does serve some functions internally for us. They do a lot of work for our major schemes in planning, prepping, letter dropping. But there should be that key interaction attendance at the local area meetings, and we want to make sure that you're getting the best out of them too. Again, we talked about a couple of years ago the concerns that were raised about potholes. At that same committee meeting, there were some concerns about the customer experience, the customer service team. we undertook at that meeting to improve that service. We had a restructure of the customer service team and a new management structure put in place. Essentially what you can see over the past 2 years since we've done that, we've made significant inroads into how we communicate with customers. The top graph shows, the bars I think show the number of inquiries we get, and the curve of the graph, the line, the blue line that you see, is where the response rates were at, and you can see a significant drop by November 2023. We tackled that pretty early, and we've got a sustained low state. So what that blue line shows is that that's the speed of a full response to a complaint. So before, where the blue line was high, we were historically sending out holding letters to say that our teams would look into this and we'll get back to you. And we did have evidence where that could be protracted for 6 months. We really tackled that quite fast, and we're at a low steady state. We respond to the vast majority of complaints first time round without having a holding response. So we track a lot of statistics on this with the authority, and I think it's been recognised that the overarching trends with customer service are much better now. And that stabilisation has enabled us for our communications to be more comprehensive, reducing that need for further clarification, further letters, and we get very few return drafts from clients in terms of that clear messaging. So we work with the authority to ensure that the responses that we're putting out there are clear and address the issue, and that the customers out there are happy. Yeah, a right first time approach really. So as I say, we have a lot of statistics that with the authority we're tracking on a regular monthly basis.
So moving on to digital improvements, one of the great things about my role is when I first came to Amey, there was lots of opportunities to make improvements using the data that we have. We didn't collect it in a way or make it available in a way that at the time that could be really useful. We've changed all that, and now we have a huge amount of data that's available to us on a daily basis and a very timely basis as well. So one of the things I've introduced is morning meetings now. So we have 15 minutes every morning with all the leads of each of the areas, and we go through the performance of the previous day and anything that's looks like it's going to fail that day in terms of the performance standard. So we're very, very focused on the data and have been now for a few months, and that's significantly changed the efficiency of the service, which is all very good. This is going to be further developed, so we're collecting more and more data for us to be able to use in a meaningful way, and we've got in the pipeline we've got the plan to move that onto mobile devices as well. So it's not necessarily only available when you're in the depot looking at our new data wall, but actually supervisors and managers can access that data out on site as well, so can have a real-time update of where we're up to. So it's a really exciting time in terms of our data management and the opportunity to use it for significant improvements in the future.
If I can just add to that, we've committed and employed additional 4 data analysts within our teams over this last 12 to 18 months. And as Emma says, that we had a lot of data, but those data analysts now are enabling us to use that data to more focus our attentions where the work is needed. And as Emma says, that the teams are holding daily meetings using the data now to respond. So again, we've committed to taking on those posts to enable us to roll out a much better service. And I think that's it, and we're open to questions.
Thank you very much. So what I think I'll do actually is I will take a first round of questions from members in a moment. So I've got basically everybody, Christine. I've got Christine, Mark, David and Mary. I'll come to in a second. Before I do that, Mohammed or Richard, just obviously what we've heard is lots of extremely good news, isn't it? And you know, I'm not, you know, I recognise that. I'm not disputing that. But your perspective as the officers responsible for managing this contract, do you share that view that it's all extremely good news, or is there anything you would challenge in that? If I can put you on the spot, sorry about that.
No, overarchingly, there is very good performance. This is what we also reported in the report that was submitted to committee. We do acknowledge there are challenges, and as Peter mentioned, these were highlighted previously and have been worked upon over the last year and a half. Those include the management of Category 2 potholes. There is a process that has been followed. Part of that included the revised asset management strategy combined with a process on managing those potholes in a sustainable way. The customer experience process in particular, the numbers are really good. The responses are good. The position we have at the moment, and as Peter mentioned, is going forward. We're just reviewing the quality of those responses and making sure that we could continue to improve in the way those responses go out and how much detail can be provided. There is an acknowledgement, you know, as Emma noted, that is also being aligned with the digital element as well. So they're trying to get real-time data so they could get that accurate information as well, so be more committed in their responses. So these are particularly the areas that we're looking at. The area highway reps as well is another area that we are looking at as well, because as Peter mentioned, you know, a lot of good work has taken place, and we do acknowledge that, but we also know that there are areas that are falling down, and those need to be addressed. And there's certainly an acknowledgement by all, you know, by Amey and also officers, that we do want to look into how we can make that work going forward. And there's you know, need to be more flexible around that as well. So,
thank you. I'm going to say the support from the Amey rep in the Southwest is excellent. If she wasn't doing that job, I'd be pestering you guys a lot more often. So I hope that's appreciated. Okay, Richard, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. And just to add to what Mohammed's just raised there, we know there's been some really good work being done in the last, particularly the last 18 to 24 months. We do appreciate, we do know there's still issues, and we're working closely with Amey colleagues and colleagues in this room, but also our community representatives as well. We know there's Cat 2 potholes, we know there's issues around cleansing, we know there's issues around weeds, particularly this year, and we know there's still issues around comms and some frustration around comms and just getting those basic messages right. So they're key areas we're working with colleagues in Amey to improve, and I know colleagues around the table have touched on that already, but that's something we're trying to get a grip on.
Thank you. Okay, so I'll take 4 questions and see where we are. Christine.
Thank you for that. It's good to hear some of the positive news, and I'm particularly happy to hear about the development of the area highway reps, and I would like to know who mine is. So I'm hoping you can roll them out and get us all informed about what they're doing, because that would be really helpful. But my questions actually are probably for Emma, and they're around street cleansing. And there's 2 questions. The first one, you mentioned spraying 4 times a year with glyphosate. And I know as a council we've been looking at reductions in the use of glyphosate. So I would welcome some comments on how much you've reduced your use of glyphosate and in what way. And the second question, and this is something that's coming up now from a lot of the councillors that I'm in contact with, is about, at the moment particularly, leaf clearance, and it doesn't seem to be happening at the moment. So can you update us on what you're doing? I know the city centre's great, but I think it's all the other areas that are really struggling at the moment with leaf clearance. So we'd welcome an update on that.
Thanks, Christine. Leaf clearance is also on my list. I'm glad it's been asked. Mark.
Thanks, Jed. Are we asking on anything?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thanks for the report. I mean, I obviously acknowledge that there's good work and there's stuff to be done. I would say, with the exception of slide 9, that I think we need to come back to a similar point to Christine. I mean, you could say it's aspirational. It feels almost close to a work of fiction, that to me, from my experience. So I think slide 9 needs a specific discussion. Just on the potholes, and I'm not particularly talking about Cat 2 here, two questions, specifically on Cat 2. Since we made the changes to the contract last year, the pack that came out earlier in the week suggests there hasn't been any change in the number of potholes that are remaining. So have the changes to the contract improved performance? Because the graph doesn't suggest that it has. And the second one is, I've got one example in mind here, but I suspect that the example is something that applies more widely across the city, because Sheffield looks different to Norwich. You know, there are a lot of hills. Do you, when you are assessing a pothole as dangerous, do you take account of where that pothole is, and whether it's on a hill or whether it's on the flat? Because I have one, well, it's not one, it's a series across a wide selection of road, basically up and around Winkerbank Hill in my ward, that were first reported 6 months ago, and it's taken 6 months for an acknowledgement that they are dangerous because of the fact that they're on a hill. So they are not Cat 2, they are Cat 1, but they've never been categorised as Cat 1. So for 6 months, I've reported it 3 or 4 times, residents have reported them. That seems to me quite a serious breakdown in communication and action. And let's face it, my ward will not be the only ward that sits on a hill in Sheffield. So I think it's quite an important thing that we bottom out at a policy level of, is it just the depth, or is it depth plus where that depth sits in terms of the topography of the city?
Thanks, Mark. Just on that, you recall the question we had at an earlier meeting from a chap called Sebastian, something I think, talking about the threats to cyclists from exactly that kind of thing, the location of the pothole. In response to that, myself and Mohammed and Representative Amey did visit the locations the chap was talking about, and we had a discussion around exactly that point. So I hope that that's been fed in, and you've got some reflections on that you can bring when you answer Mark's question. David.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation and for coming along to the meeting today. I can recall many years ago when I was just a slip of a lad sitting in a room in Howden House with John Charlton and representatives of your company talking about this new contract, this new great PFI contract that we were going to embark on. And I was told, and I remember this because it was a great sell on the doorstep, that Sheffield was going to move from pothole city to the city with the best roads in Europe. Now, that sticks in my mind, and I was told that the driver for that was you were going to get these things absolutely spot on, and then it would save you in maintenance cost over the time of the contract, which sounded to make absolute sense. Are you telling me today that it's now taken 12 years to get to a position where we are actually getting roads down that meet those requirements, that take us up the league tables, and that aren't going to require much more regular maintenance? Because certainly up to this stage, my post box has been filled with concerns about roadways and footpaths, and the experience on the doorstep doesn't match what was said 12 years ago. And I just want to know if the improvements from 2024 are going to see delivered what we were told would be delivered all that time ago. Thank you.
Thanks, David. And Mary.
Thank you, and thanks for your report. Just a few things from me. It's mainly about street cleansing. If I was to take you to my ward at the moment, today, in the district centre, you would see weeds growing around the street furniture that are 3 and 4 foot high, growing into small trees, small bushes, and that is constant. That's all the way through the main drag, through my ward, and in other parts of my ward as well. Leaves are a constant issue, and I've seen leaves in the summer that are still there from the previous autumn, which means to me maybe that street hasn't been cleansed at all, and that happens regularly. The other thing is fly tipping. We haven't got a grip on fly tipping, and I know it's everybody's responsibility, and I'd really like a conversation about what we can do with our communities as well as with yourselves and the council. In terms of the reps, I think we do need a discussion about what is happening and what their role is, because I think the proactive side of it is not there. So those are my questions and my points.
Okay, thank you. Have you got all that?
One more point. Sorry about this. Yeah, and in terms of the vegetation, if you go to some of the estates, some of our estates are absolutely spotless because people don't drop litter. But on the pavements, where we've still got pavements with paving slabs, the vegetation growing between the cracks, again, is 5, 6, 7 inches in points. People can't walk down it. It's a trip hazard. People in wheelchairs and motorised scooters cannot go down there because it is dangerous for them. And these are, I'm talking about disabled people. So that's another issue I wanted to talk about. They're not being weeded, the weeds are not removed.
Thanks. So questions about the use of glyphosate, questions about overgrown weeds, questions about fly tipping, leaves from more than one person, leaf clearance, Cat 2 potholes, assessment of potholes on curves and bends and hills and things. Did it take 12 years to get the idea to work?
Okay, so a couple of themes there. We'll start with some of the latter ones in terms of the carriageway condition. To the point of the contract refresh, which took place, I think it was around April this year, in terms of that signing of that document to change the contract. It's quite early days to notice a significant change from them. However, what we did do, we acted at least 12 months prior to that with that new asset management strategy. So we were undertaking preventative maintenance from 2024 before we actually signed a change to the contract. So what that actually did was to maintain the position. I talked about where the DFT data for the Sheffield network shows that circa 2% of the carriageway network requires maintenance. We'd like to think that that will slightly improve, but there's always an annual cycle. When and kind of coming into the second point about what you were promised at the start of the contract in 2012. From 2012, there was a 5-year capital investment period where it was always understood that that significant injection of spend to get the network from what was deemed as pothole city back then up to a good state where at least 70% of the whole of the network was resurfaced. At that 5-year point, around 2017, 2018, that's where that graph shows that network was in an overall good state from a national point of view, and it's been maintained at that level. So there's two different things in terms of the overall strategic position of the network. As I say, there's 13.5 million square metres out there, a large network, and for only 2% of that requiring maintenance, which is where the contract on an annual basis flags what those failed areas are, and then we intervene with the programme and undertake work in that following contract year. So we're fully compliant in terms of the status of the network and the work that we do to maintain that very high standard of overall network. So, I'm not so sure that overall network will significantly appear to get better. I think we'll maintain that DFT position of sort of second or third in the country. I'd like to think that we'd move up a ranking or two because we are investing in forward preventative maintenance, which is over and above contract compliance, but it's an asset management strategy where we have invested significant amounts of money through this PFI, through the DFT credits and the council funding to get the network in a place. And what we're saying is that we will maintain that position right through to the end of the contract. So I think there will always be Cat 2s and potholes that we'll commit to repairing, but it's a very small percentage of the overarching network. And if we could sort of reiterate that stat of only 1.6 potholes per mile in Sheffield, what that means on the ground is, though, you will get a street where there might be 10 or 20 potholes, but there'll be another area of the network that hasn't got any for miles. But what that would lead to is that is the street that is going to fail the condition score that will be in a future scheme. So rather than as reactive and doing 20 potholes, which might be a case that we would do that from a safety point of view in the meantime, but that means that will be the next overall street to resurface. But there's a timescale in which those are identified and they go through in the contract cycle. So it could be up to 18 months before that road would be done in that next contract year. So there's a set cycle defined within the contract that identifies those works. Go on, Martin.
That's the graph you should be looking at when you're looking at condition. The right-hand side, you can see the green spike, that coincides with 2012 contract sign, and you can see it progressively dropping down to, I don't know about best in Europe, because I don't measure against Europe, but we're definitely measuring against best in UK, and that is that. You are very close to the top, if not, hopefully will be very close to the top in the future. So that's, I think that evidence is what that promise was, you know, originally. And now what's happening at the moment is you've got this spend to save exercise going on. So they'll go resurface, surface dressing, weatherproofing, keeping the water out. So we're maintaining the investment, protecting the investment that's already been spent, the money that's been spent, the millions, the 500 million that was spent originally in that core investment phase. So that is worth looking at that graph. That is independent data. That is somebody else telling us where we sit in the... I've gone. Well, it's gone flat. So that's us benchmarked independently. That's not our data. Sorry, our data we give to the central government, and then they compare us against the rest of the country. So it's independent data. So you could say it's as factual as possibly can get. So yeah. So, and I've got a point about the triage and prioritisation as well. I'll let you.
Yeah, so Pete would explain a bit more about the process in terms of how we categorise potholes and depths and specific locations.
Yeah, so in terms of defects and how we actually inspect the network, various types of inspection. There's safety inspections, there's condition inspections. Condition inspections are very much what Peter was talking about that overarching forward programme of how you identify those roads for the next investment. Safety inspections are far more reactive. There are different frequencies depending on the classification of the road, which is in line with national guidance. That's how the Highways Act tells us how we should classify our road and how we should inspect. The inspectors themselves, they're trained to national guidance. In terms of talking about specific road users, they're trained to basically consider all road users. So two-wheel traffic, pedestrians, wheelchair users, they consider the whole lot. In terms of depth of defect, that used to be the way that it was done. It was very much a threshold level. So if you said, I don't know, 40 millimetre was your threshold, if something was 39 millimetres, it was very black and white. That was where the line was drawn. Anything above it was a defect, anything below it was not a defect. That's not how it is now. National standards actually changed in 2016. There was a new guidance document that came out. That's what we use, which is far more risk assessed. But it's very much in the hands of the inspectors. They go out there, they look at the prevailing area. You can imagine exactly as you're saying, where a defect is, you might have high footfall, a lot of pedestrians, like a city centre. The converse of that, it might be out in the wilds where you've got one person a year and this kind of thing. So it's very much, it gives them the opportunity to actually flex with the area. And that's exactly how they work. Like I said before, our policy, our procedures, they do get tested in court, and they're tested very rigorously. And we do very well at that. It does actually prove that the policy is robust, it's in line with the national standards, and that the inspectors who have to go on the stand and actually justify their decisions, it comes out very well. It comes out as a very robust policy and procedure, and it is well tested.
I can add to that, Peter. Prioritisation. To implement that policy change, we developed a triage paper, which has looked at those things: geography, priority, type of road. I think what we'll do is add hills to it. It seems a real issue, so it can change. We can develop it, but absolutely, a primary network will be prioritised in terms of potholes in advance of local roads. It's just the nature, because the risk assessment has taken place. So there is a triage process, if you like. But it can flex, it can change, it can improve. If it needs to improve, can't it?
Thanks. I think I'm conscious of the time. There are some other topics and there are other questions that members have indicated. I think we do need to bring this issue back to a briefing if we can. Do you want to move on to the other questions? Thanks.
So yeah, I'll answer the questions with regard to the, first of all, glyphosate. So we do have a glyphosate reduction plan in place. We are only spraying hard areas, so not verges and soft areas. We're also using a glyphosate mix with a product called Shikara, which obviously reduces the glyphosate we use, but is very, very effective. And that is what we are using at the moment to help us to reduce the glyphosate. In terms of the street cleansing and leafing, so again, when I first came, I recognised that we were very reactive in the way that we managed our street cleansing. We didn't operate a cyclical programme of cleansing because it had kind of like deteriorated over a number of years into a ring up and say there's a problem, and the resource was then put into that rather than carrying out a cyclical programme. So what we've done is we're working with Mohammed and the team at the moment to change that and to redirect the resources into a cyclical programme, which we're kind of almost ready to go with. And that will, what we've done, and again I talked previously about data, but one of the things that's been really important is that we've been able to kind of plan the cycle of which every street will be cleaned based on a heat map of the number of reactive requests that have been made. So we need to find a starting point in terms of where we start this work, and that's what we've used as the previous data. And recognise that will need some tweaking, but once we go live with the cyclical programme, we will have around 85% of our resource put into cyclical and around 15% into a reactive, sort of the 24, 48 hour kind of response. And that over a period of time will then ensure that that every road is swept if it needs to be. So again, one of the changes that I've made is look at the roles of the supervisors, and the supervisors will be very much going out, and rather than kind of doing the job and managing the rotas that has been traditionally their role, is to go out and inspect streets as well, so we can proactively look out and say, does this street need cleaning, does it need a deep dig, if we send a small sweeper, is that going to be sufficient to do the job, what equipment do we need? Sometimes, and especially initially where roads haven't been swept for a period of time, we need to have an additional crew member with a hoe, so we can what we call dig out. So the operative digs out, and then the sweeper goes and sweeps up all the debris. We are aligning that with the grounds maintenance team, so that will then pick up leaf clearing as well. So that again, we're making the teams work collaborative together. Where there are synergies between the teams, we're doing that. Traditionally, they have kind of done things separately and maybe not taken advantage of the two things working together. So we've got that process in place, ready to kind of go. There's a few contractual bits and pieces that we need to sort out, but I anticipate a significant improvement in the street cleansing service over the next 6 months, definitely. And I'd love to sit here in 12 months' time and say, well, how does it feel, kind of thing, because you should see a big improvement.
Just on that point, do you have a view on whether the number of kind of litter bins we have in all these places is adequate, whether the provision of more litter bins in some places would actually, reduce the litter problem in the first place?
So interestingly, this is, I'm very boring because these are the kind of things I find really interesting, but I've just completed a study on what we've got out there in terms of litter bins and how quickly they're being filled, and we are just about to embark on a discussion with Richard and Mohammed and David Wayne about a trial that we want to put in place, and we want to implement what's called big belly bins. They are basically solar powered. They are compactor bins, so they can contain 3 to 4 times the amount of waste that a normal bin would do. They're also lidded, so it has an environmental benefit as well, and they are touch-free. So basically, they have a proximity sensor on them. So as you walk up to them, the lid lifts up, and then you can deposit the rubbish, then it closes it down, and then it compacts. The really sexy thing about it is that actually you have an app. We can, all the operatives, we have an app on our phones, and basically we can monitor the fill level of these bins, and it will also alert us to when the bin needs to be scheduled to be emptied. So we're going to we're going to do this with 20 bins around the city and see if this is a model that we could use going forward.
Is that in strategy?
Sorry, can I just come back on the leaf? I think it sounds great, and I'm looking forward to it. My question is now, because we've got lots of leaves and lots of block gullies and lots of complaints coming in. So do you want us still to just report them as reactive at the moment, or is there a programme happening now on streets?
So we've got 14 teams at the moment leafing that are out all the time, and we've got 7 teams that are out on the night shift as well, and they've been running for the last couple of weeks. We've got a huge amount of resource leafing at the moment, but we can only cover, we've had some very windy days, some very windy weather, and a lot of leaves have come down very quickly, and we've also had almost like we had a leaf fall, and then we had another leaf fall afterwards, weren't we? You know, a separate weather event. So I would say yes, please report it, because then we can prioritise the areas. What we are trying to do is prioritise those areas that are likely to become a health and safety risk, so those where they're likely to get compacted and become detritus and therefore slippery and a risk. So we are prioritising on that basis, but we are literally working, every resource is out leafing at the moment, and we've hired in a couple of extra vehicles as well to help with the leafing to get the bigger roads done, rather than relying on the smaller sweepers that have to frequently come back to the depot to tip, so we can keep the machines out there longer and collect more when we're out.
I think I'd like leafing to come back to another briefing as well, to be honest. I think there's more to be said about this. Mark, you wanted to come back on? Yeah.
Just on I mean, take all the points, and I'm not disputing any of the stuff in here, with the exception of slide 9. I would just give you one anecdote on the leafing of something that was done this week in Walkley. The leaves were cleared. They were put in 2 enormous piles up to about me, and I'm not very tall, but, you know, tall enough. One of them was outside an old lady's gate, and she couldn't get out of her house. So I think the reality is occasionally slightly different to what's been presented. Just coming back on the potholes, I don't dispute the graph, but the graph is only as good as the data that's entered. I am surprised that it's taken 12 years to recognise that Sheffield sits on many hills, and that a pothole on a hill might be different to a pothole on the flat. I think that's surprising. I think residents would find that surprising. I would say, if we just go back to the example of my area, because I think it tells us something. You've got a group that were deemed to be hazardous and were done straight away. You've got a group that were deemed to be not hazardous, but in discussions in the last 2 weeks, it's felt that that was a wrong designation. So they were designated category 2. A contractor was supposed to come out to do it, but didn't do it. And so they've been wrongly designated as category 2 and dealt with, when actually they're category 1. So yes, the data absolutely shows a good picture, and I'm sure a lot of it is accurate. I'm not disputing all of it. But if this is happening on a hill of the steepness of Winkerbank Hill, it's probably happening in other parts of the city of equal steepness. And if the data that's entered is wrong, then that graph isn't that graph. And so I just think it's not an issue that we're going to resolve today, but I do think that the quality of the data needs some interrogating. And coming back to that point about the hill, there are a lot of streets that are on hills, and if you're driving into it like that, it's different to driving into it like that. And I think that needs to be urgently addressed.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mark. We're still on the first round of questions. Mary's indicated to come back. Yeah, I don't think actually your questions have been answered the first time round. Yes, so Mary's questions about fly tipping and overgrown weeds. Do you need a reminder of the question, or can you take that?
So fly tipping, we have a 48-hour response time for all fly tipping, and we adhere to that. We've not failed that performance measure for some considerable time. So are you saying that there's fly tipping being reported and not dealt with?
Oh, fly tipping is dealt with. we have, people report it. Some people may walk past and not report it, so it might stay there longer. But we've got hotspots, and we've not got to grips with how we deal with it, because it's a constant problem. It's been a constant problem for a good few years now. So there's that. But my other question was about vegetation on the street that is overgrown, and that is a fairly new problem, and it's unsightly and it's dangerous.
I think for the first point, fly tipping, yeah, we'd welcome any additional support that we can get. As Emma says, that we're 100% compliant in terms of reacting and dealing with fly tips, but if there's any additional help that we can have from the authority with enforcement, we'd welcome that and a discussion wider on that.
Just to add to that, I think, so regarding the fly tipping element, as Emma said, Amey are performing really well in that area particularly. I agree that there is a wider discussion regarding bringing in all the other disciplines in the street scene directorate, which is something that is actually going on actively at the moment with colleagues in enforcement, colleagues through media and comms as well. So there is a pull to try and get all these other disciplines in to see how we can actually address this issue as a wider council initiative.
I could answer. And with regard to the vegetation, at the moment, most of the service is reactive. So basically, if you report it, it will be dealt with very quickly. We are, the plan is to move to a more cyclical service, so it will be proactively addressed. But at the moment, it needs to be reported in order for it to be fixed. So is it something you have reported?
Absolutely. It's not just in my ward, it's in other wards in the South East. And I know the MP has reported it regularly. And we were told, the MP was told, the grass between the paving slabs is not long enough yet to cause a problem. And this was when the grass was maybe 5 to 6 inches long in great big clumps between paving stones. So that's what Amey said. We won't clear it because it's not a danger at 6 inches. It needs to be longer than that. So that's a big issue. This is what we were told. I know that in the South East LAC, they put £60,000, I think, into the environmental stewardship, and they've been clearing those pavements. But it's not for the LACs to subsidise Amey, in my view. But that's a choice they've taken. But it's still not. In my view, that's not what we should be spending our money on in our communities. And that's because it's within the Amey contract to make the pavements clean and of litter and vegetation. But as I said, if you want to come down and look at my ward, I have reported all this stuff, so some of it may have gone by now, but it's there. People complain when they can see when it's become a real unsightly mess, and that's when people complain. But that shouldn't happen. It should be cleared straight away. And I don't know how you do that. I know we've got a policy on glyphosate, and I don't know how, but it's not working for my ward, I'll tell you that.
So if we could catch you after, we'll have a discussion about some specifics there. Just to the point of the environmental stewardship, we've got to be careful that a lot of the areas they operate aren't just highway land. They operate across housing and parks and countryside as well. So a lot of that money they spend is not on highway as well.
Thanks. So second round of questions. Peter, I've got Peter and Mark Jones, and so, yeah, okay, Peter.
Thank you. I welcome what you said, Emma, about this trial of the fat bins, was it? Greedy bins? Belly bins. Wonderful. Yes, that is obviously something we look forward to seeing the results of. But in general, I would say, why are you not already on top of street sweeping and bin emptying across the city? Specifically, what is your plan for the maintenance and litter clearing and bin emptying along the greater green planting across the city centre especially? And why your website says you will respond to requests to empty bins in 24 hours, but don't?
Mark?
Thank you, Chair. I was kind of interested in the element, I'm glad that you're going to bring it back to the committee for the leafing policy. I don't know whether you could maybe give us some indicators now, whether it's for a later one. Some of the complaints I've had in areas like Norwood isn't so much the amount of litter from leaf litters, trees shedding their leaves and such like. It's also the seeds. So there's lots of acorns being shed down, And most of the people in that area are more worried about the seed detritus element because they're large rolling things that people wind up putting their ankles out on. So it's those kind of bits. But also specifically interested in the fact that you want to get away from a reactive one, which is great because only those that complain get a service, to a more kind of cyclical process where you're going to actually be anticipating issues. My observation would be, and I don't know whether this is a false observation, is the type of leaf litter you get, the type of trees that are dropping their leaves. Some of the bigger leaves persist longer and become more of an issue because they're more kind of compact better, maybe, make it more slippy, maybe more difficult for certainly older citizens. So rather than, I know you've got to start from a beginning position of number of complaints you get, but moving towards that position where you're looking at the type of leaf coming down, the type of seed coming down, I don't know whether that already feeds in, whether you'll be then looking at the demographic of the people that live in there, the age specifically, and the mobility aspects of them, whether that's something, with the new data inputters you're going to be getting, it'd be kind of good to know that they're kind of going towards that needs-based element rather than just those with the sharpest elbows that complain the most getting the priority thing would be really, really good. And I'm hoping that will feed into the committee bit when it comes in there, Joe. Thank you.
So,
thank you. I've just got, I think, three separate points I'd like to ask about. The first thing is just going back to the decision we took around a year ago around the asset management chair and the contract change. And I know it has been mentioned in relation to some proactive work. I just wonder if you could just go a little bit more into saying that, yeah, we definitely did make the right decision to do that and how that's worked. So that's my first thing. My other two are sort of slightly smaller things, maybe. One is around working with the highways department. So where, I mean, I could give an example, but I'm not trying to do casework, but where there's an issue with a problem on the highway and it's not clear, so somebody reports it, me in the particular instance I can think of, to highways or to Amey, but actually it's not clear whose responsibility it is, whether it was the wrong instructions that went to Amey, whether the line painting wasn't done properly because of communication problem. Just how closely are you able to work together to actually get to the bottom of a problem? If you want to know the detail, I can give it you after. But my other thing is I think sort of comes from other questions that have been asked as much as anything, which is around the local representatives that we have attached to each LAC. Because I'm not sure I was even clearly aware that they were still in progress, or what their role was. Certainly it seems to be very different from how it was in the first few years when the contract was there. And what I've just been thinking around the various comments is maybe they need a relaunch. Because I know our Amey rep used to come to our local CAG meetings, for example, or ward meetings, things like that, and we just don't seem to get that anymore. And maybe that's because we're not asking and we could have it, but I just wonder whether their whole role needs a good relaunch so we can make more use of them in the best possible way.
thanks. So I'm just going to add one thing to this round of questions, and that is the comms issue. I think was mentioned earlier, but I don't think we've really had a go at. I'm aware right at the beginning, I mean, I think there's progress made in terms of repeated acknowledgements and the thing. I acknowledge that, very much welcome that. Right at the beginning of the contract, I remember there was a process where people were getting replies at the end of the process saying, case closed, and in some cases they were very unhappy to get those because the thing, as they saw it, hadn't been dealt with, and we stopped giving these case closed messages. But so I suppose my question is, what do you see the final piece of the comms, what do you see the solution being to the final piece of the comms problem? Do you have an ambition to go beyond what progress you've made? And if so, what is that? So, yeah, that's the final round of questions. We haven't got very long, so, and I appreciate some of these things you've touched on already, so please have a go.
Joe, just to cover your last point there, then in terms of the comms, we've got to remember that any issues and complaints that are a very small percentage of the overall volume that we get on a monthly and an annual basis. So if there is a perceived issues, it is only a handful that are coming through now that we do get regular monthly challenge on, and there's a big focus and scrutiny on the specifics of those cases. So I'd like to think that largely the customer service that we provide is an exceptional service. Just come back to yourself, Sue, that the contract refresh around the preventative maintenance, yeah, officially that was only really signed off April this year. With these things, it does take time. You don't see instant results in any one year. It's a cumulative effect of that continued preventative maintenance strategy. As I said, we undertook a year ahead of us agreeing that deal. We got on and did this anyway. So we have laid 750,000 square metres of additional work over and above our contract requirements. And what we'd like to see, that cumulative effect over the coming years, we will see a significant benefit of that embedding in. And the data that comes out year on year for the overall network position, we'll see us maintaining or improving that position. Totally agree. I think I did commit to that relaunch of the local area, highways area reps. So we'll get our heads together how we do that. We're already doing that internally, but it's a case of involving you guys and making sure that there is that clear reset and a clear interaction.
So I think I'll just remember your questions, but around the there was a question around leafing earlier about us making piles of leaves. That tends to be community groups that make those piles, because we don't pile up leaves. We clear them straight away. In terms of the position, the proactive work, I can only comment since I've been in the business, and we recognised that there was a need for it. I recognised there was a need for it straight away, and have put plans in place to change that. And we've put a considerable amount of work and planning into it, and Mohammed's aware of the thought that's gone into it, and all the the resource that's gone into making it a success. So I think we will continue to review it as we go through and make the lessons from it, and keep it improving. But in terms of your comment about the looking at different areas, we had to have a starting point. So the heat map was literally a starting point. The idea is that we will review continuously when we're doing this cyclical sweeping is, did it need doing? Did it need this particular? And we'll continue to adjust it. The other thing we've done as well is we've made it a seasonal service. So, for example, roads that would look like needing doing several times a month in November because of leaf detritus then wouldn't necessarily need it in June in certain areas of the city. So we're having a seasonal approach to the way that we run this cyclical work, so that we can put the resources in the best area possible. We are absolutely taking into account the condition of the road in terms of everything else that's on it as well. So it's not just litter, it's obviously leaves and sort of the leaf detritus, if you like, the tree detritus. My understanding is that we don't contractually have to collect leaves as they fall, but we do have a contractual requirement to remove them once they become detritus. So what I'm trying to do, because it's easier to clean the leaves before they become detritus and slippy and so on, is to try and bring that forward so that we're picking these leaves up literally as soon after they've fallen as possible. Did that answer your question, or was there another bit to it?
Could you make a comment specifically on the Greater Green and litter around that collecting along the Greater Green network?
Yeah, I think now that scheme has been handed back to Amey to maintain, so it's just part of the normal city network. Yeah. We'll take that one away and look specifically into that.
Yeah, I'll pick that up and I'll make sure that you get some feedback on that.
Was that everything? I think Peter had a question about bins, but it may have been covered previously. Mark, your question on acorns. No, Sue, yes.
Yeah, so it was really just about internal workings and how well you're able to work between Amey and highways on, what may be quite relatively small issues, but actually by talking to each other, you could, because it's not always clear to us or to the public in every instance who's responsible, so it's easy to go to the wrong place.
Yes, I understand that. In terms of relationships between the two organisations, yes, we are very close. We do have one-to-ones with the management team on a weekly basis. So any of these, if you like, grey areas, we can pick them up and we can iron them out very quickly. So yes, very close working relationship, and ultimately we're all trying to achieve the same thing. We're all trying to achieve a good service for Sheffield. We might wear different hats, but we're all pulling in the same direction.
Just in terms of wider stakeholder as well, we are significantly looking wider. I know Emma's talking to Veolia a lot more. We're having a lot more interaction with Mohammed and Richard through improved relationships with Housing Department and Parks and Countryside, but I think there's still more to do on that. So when inquiries come in and it's not clear whether it's highway land or parks or housing, obviously we'd respond to the highway, whether it is or it isn't. But you know, there is a further conversation about how we can help interact wider across other council departments as well.
Thank you. That's answered everybody's questions. Excellent. Thank you. Well, thank you very much for coming. Obviously, I appreciate the time you've given us and to answer our questions, the huge amount of work that goes into this contract. I hope you appreciate the huge amount of money we're paying for it. Obviously, there is a great deal that is working very well, and there are issues that we are still offering some challenge on, and we will continue to challenge that, and we'll continue to. We've got some issues that have come today that we're going to take away and bring back to briefing. So I hope we can continue to engage on those things. I would like to suggest. I mean, relaunch is a grand word. I mean, can we have an email to all members, please, in the next week, saying who the Amey reps are, highway reps are, and what you can ask of them? Is that too grand a proposition? Can we actually just do
absolutely.
that?
I'll take that one away as an action, and we'll get that circulated and clear.
Excellent. So that can go to all members of the council. I think that would be useful. Excellent. So thank you very much. There aren't any recommendations in this paper, so I'm going to make a recommendation. Sorry, go on, Mark. Well, I was going to make a recommendation that we note the information that we've had.
Thank you. Happy to do that. I think there's a number of strands that have come out here. So I think it'd be useful if we picked up those strands specifically at another meeting in, say, 6 months' time to see what has happened with those strands. The customer service point, I think the data point in there is distinct from the Cat 1 and Cat 2 point. The street cleansing point, I think there are some other issues that I'll send separately, particularly around looking in certain areas about the difference in street cleansing between, street cleansing and maintenance between different parts of the same geographical area when they're maintained by Amey and when they're maintained by housing associations. It can be quite stark, particularly in North Sheffield. So I think it'd be useful to come back and just pick those specific rather than a general briefing.
I think that I agree. I think it would be useful. I think we need to go. We said we'd take some of these issues to briefings. I think we need to have, in discussing briefings, exactly what to bring back to a future committee. But let's do that. Yes. So with that noted, can we agree to note the information we've had and thank the Amey people for coming to the meeting? Thank you. And that's great. Right, we've run slightly over the planned time for that, but let's just go back to the work programme. Amanda.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think I've got anything else to add. We made some very minimal changes after the last meeting, but they were discussed in the pre-agenda. So I think that's it from me.
Are there any comments or questions from members on the work programme? No. Okay. Well, I could comment at length on some of the items, but let's not. Can we take the work programme as agreed? I'll take that as agreed. Excellent. That is agreed. Next item, statement of licensing policy review. If you want to introduce yourselves and report. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jane Goff. I'm a Licensing Strategy and Policy Officer working for the Licensing Service, and I'm here with
Ian Ashmore. I'm the Assistant Director for Environmental Regs and Licensing.
Okay, so I'll just give you a brief overview of why we're here today. So over the last 12 months, the Licensing Service have been reviewing their Statement of Licensing Policy, which is required to be undertaken every 5 years under the Licensing Act. So this year we have to get this updated policy published by January 2026. So just a bit of background of the policy itself. So under the Licensing Act, it's a statutory policy like I've just explained, and it basically explains how Sheffield's licensing authority will implement the Licensing Act, which is the national legislation within Sheffield itself. So the Licensing Act covers the sale and supply of alcohol, the provision of regulated entertainment and the provision of late night refreshment, specifically that being after the hours of 2300 hours and between 5 in the morning. So very much like your takeaways, hot food provision, that sort of thing. So the statutory objectives, the licensing objectives that we need to upkeep, which is the whole purpose of the policy, is the prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, prevention of public nuisance and the protection of children from harm. So these 4 objectives run throughout the entire policy. So everything that we have within here is to make sure that these are not contravened. Obviously there's application processes, there's conditions of applications that need to be on licenses as just to keep, I'm tripping over my words, I'm sorry. In order to maintain the licensing objectives, conditions can be added, timings are agreed to make sure that none of those are contravened. I'll just scoot through. So basically this year we've undertaken a large consultation process over the summer months. That concluded in August, which we've outlined in the pack there for you, what we've done there and the outcome of it. Excuse me 1 second. So we're due to go to full council on the 3rd of December 2025. This is this year, obviously, with view of it being passed and published by January 2026. I'm happy to say that there's not been a great deal of change required. We have done a large consultation of 3,000 plus emails, Gov delivery, messaging. We've asked for, we did a Have Your Say page where we've asked for opinions and questions to be answered in line with whether the policy meets the needs of the people, the users of the policy, the stakeholders, members, officers of the council, responsible authorities. And overall, we got quite a minimal response, I'm quite happy to say, which I'd like to think that the policy was already fit for purpose, so there's not been a great deal of change required. So I'll just put that in there because there hasn't been a great deal of response. But there's been several briefing sessions with licensing steering groups, members of the council, directors, managers, senior officers. So the outcome of the consultation, first of all, there was, and we knew there would be a request for a cumulative impact assessment within Sheffield. We know that that's something that's been on the cards for quite some time, and that has been asked for from various different teams and different members of the public, resident groups. As a result of that, and due to the statutory timing of this policy needing to be published, there's a separate piece of work that is being undertaken by the public health colleagues, and they are looking into evidence gathering. They've been undertaking evidence gathering across this calendar year. Their timeline they've given us is that they hope to be able to pull together the evidence that they've got by December or pre-Christmas, they said, and then hopefully by springtime next year they would hope to be able to pull an options paper together to see what the outcome of that evidence gathering is as to whether there is the need for a cumulative impact policy or not. So as much as we refer to this within the licensing policy, because it is obviously heavily linked, and work goes hand in hand, we've not been able to undertake the actual assessment itself at the same time as the policy review because we wouldn't get the policy published in time for the statutory timescales. So it is a separate piece of work that Public Health are undertaking. It's in the process, so it's not something we just haven't done. We're in the process of doing it with public health colleagues. Like I said, they're gathering a lot of their evidence from ambulance service, NHS, that sort of thing, so in crime stats, that sort of thing. So that's all been, it's in the process on the side, so that it's not in as a policy yet, it's being looked at, so that should be addressed by early next year. So I'll just scoot down. So in terms of any changes that we have made, there's not been that many to change. There's been a push for cumulative impact, like I've just said. We can't automatically, there was a request to put a temporary ban on applications in the city centre until this was undertaken, until it was put in place, but we can't do that. The legislation doesn't allow us to do that. And also to control like blanket conditions and control blanket timings within certain areas in the city centre. Again, we can't do that. The legislation doesn't allow us. So each application is assessed on its own merit, as it always has been. Just to bear in mind, if there was a cumulative impact policy put in place next year, for example, obviously our policy would be updated, it wouldn't stop applications being submitted within that area. So if there was a zone in the city centre, for example, or any suburban areas that are deemed that necessary, like the Ecclesall Road area, because that's obviously very busy, Sharrow, all that side of things, even if there was deemed that a cumulative impact policy would be required, it wouldn't stop applications being brought in. So they would still be accepted because we have to. They would just come to a licensing committee to be decided. So essentially that, it doesn't stop things altogether, it just gives more of an impact, it gives more of a decision-making process back to the members. We've had some input in requesting a heavier wording on fly posting, which we've put in there, making as much as we can legislatively make people remove fly posting. Obviously it's a menace, it's public nuisance, but we do work with planning colleagues on this. Obviously they are the ones that would enforce the matter in terms of any sort of prosecution moving forward. But in terms of the wording in the policy, we've moved the wording to be more of an expectation that licence holders would actually be instructed to remove those as soon as they were aware of them, for example. Because the difficult thing we have is that a lot of the time the licence holders that are in question don't actually know the people that are putting the flying up, because it's external companies, contractors or whatever. But essentially the book still stops with them. So they still would have that expectation to have that removed in whatever way they felt necessary. So hopefully that can have a bit, we can work with colleagues with that moving forward. So we've had some information from Sheffield Action on Plastic. I think this was following possible, I think it was Tramline's Fringe event over the summer. Obviously quite disappointed to see a lot of single-use plastic in use in the city centre areas or certain events. Again, we can't make people use polycarbonate vessels, we can't stop people using single-use plastics, but we can certainly advise them that this is not something that we would support, and obviously give them, all our colleagues in responsible authorities push the same thing. So we're kind of pushing the same message that we've put in the section, that as much as polycarbonate drinking vessels are encouraged for safety purposes in terms of injury, anything like that, crime and disorder, it's also pushing the need to support the environmental issues as well, obviously reducing the use of single-use plastics. So we have inputted that into the policy as well. Public health colleagues have requested more of a focus on alcohol harms, which we've been happy to put in, so we've introduced the full section of of alcohol harms within the public safety section. There's lots of information in relation to emphasising not just focus on drug use and paraphernalia and all that sort of thing, and combating the issue. It's also to do, unfortunately, with the raising weapons use we've had and knife crime and that sort of thing. So it's all encompassing really, but it's just kind of bringing more of a focus on the relevant sort of wording to make sure that premises are looking at that as well as just the day-to-day matters of your risks of alcohol use, drug use, that sort of thing. Because unfortunately it is in the nighttime economy that we are faced with. We've had extra wording and extra information from Safeguarding Children linked in with public health. So obviously to improve or to make people aware of the harmfulness on children's cognitive development, and so linked into health matters in that way. We've linked in with Safeguarding Children to make sure that information is up to date and there's more prevalence based on that, so people are more aware. You'll be aware of the public space protection order that was introduced in the last 6 months, so that's obviously something that is already in place in the city centre, so that's been placed into the policy to say that we'll link in with that in terms of alcohol confiscation and what people are or not allowed to do, obviously linked with the police and city centre management colleagues. We've got more powers in that sense. The most of the rest of the public messaging that we had through was that it was easy to understand. They weren't bothered about a great deal about it being too difficult. Everything was easy to, it met the need, should I say, as to what people felt that they needed it to do. In terms of, I've covered cumulative impact, so that's a separate item. Let me go to my change document, excuse me 1 second. We've had Martin's Law introduced, so that's the new counter-terrorism legislation that's coming into force. That obviously has to be in our policy and is something that is already pretty much considered anyway. It's just made it more of a forefront that we're including that in applications and making sure people give those measures of what they're expected of them in order to create counter-terrorism measures and support that law. I don't think there's been is there anything else you think I need to cover? I think they're the biggest things I've put in really, or that have changed. There's not been a big push, to be quite honest. Like I've said originally, the lack of required change we've taken as a positive thing, because we can only just assume that it's fit for purpose because people haven't. We've done a massive consultation with the public, licence holders, responsible authorities, and very little has had to be changed. So obviously you've all been briefed on everything of changes that have been put in place on a number of occasions, so I can just put questions to you guys now, I guess.
Thank you. Questions, comments from members? Dave.
It's just a comment, and the comment is thank you, because this is the one of all the licensing policies. This is the one where I know I'm not going to be inundated with emails from people who are extremely unhappy about what we're doing or what we're proposing. And I think what you miss out, what we have to bear in mind when it comes to this area of licensing, is that we're very much dictated to by the national legislation. So much as we might want to wish list in this policy of all the things we'd like to achieve locally, we have to abide by the law of the land, and I think you do an incredible job to get the sort of things in to meet local needs and still abiding by that legislation. It's just incredible how you adapted to that, and from a licensing point of view, we're extremely grateful, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Sue.
Sorry, just a couple of things. One is just a question about process, and the other is just relates back to something. But first, I'd like to say I'm really pleased to hear that the CIP, if that's the right initials, is actually going to be developed. I think maybe it's a bit overdue, but nevertheless, let's think forward, let's think positive. So, yeah, I think that's a good thing to hear. My question about the process just relates to section 4.1 when you talk about the partners that you are expected to engage with, and it includes, so for example, one comment is persons the licensing authority considers to be representative of holders of premises licenses. And then there's other groups as well where you pick people who you consider, you or your team, to be representative. I'm just wondering how you pick those people and how you know they're representative. And my last question is just, I'm sure it was sort of this time last year when I raised the issue because there'd been quite a bit in the media about the Ask for Angela scheme, which had been shown not to be working. And I know I asked about whether we knew whether in Sheffield that was working. And I just wondered if there'd been any further instances or any information back from that. Thank you.
Okay, so in terms of the, is it 4.1 you mentioned, didn't you? That basically stipulates who we have to consult with in this process. In terms of such persons that we consider, essentially it's our database of licence holders, so it's people that are affected by the Licensing Act, that either use the policy, are affected by the policy. So, because there's several different types of licence holders, so it's not just people that hold a premises licence, it'd be personal licence holders, local residents, there's religious groups, churches. The list is very lengthy. So it's not a case of us picking and choosing who we have chosen to consult with. It is essentially who anything that this impacts on, which is pretty much everybody really.
So I could just ask, sorry, I'm being a bit picky now. So you're not choosing a sample, you're contacting everybody? Because the reading of this is that you're picking, or you could pick a nice little sample that, right, thank you.
No, we can't do, this is literally a snippet out of the legislation which is why it's in italics, so you can see that's not my wording, or ours should I say. This is what we're told to do. So essentially, we can't pick and choose. It wouldn't be a fair process or consultation in order to do that. So.
Thanks. Mary?
Yeah. Oh, as for Angela, sorry. I'm very sorry. Sorry, I forgot what you'd said. We work with colleagues in the Violence of Women and Girls service team, they're reviewing their nighttime safety charter as we speak. So that's something that is being undertaken. We don't necessarily get figures or outcomes of the Ask for Angela schemes per se, because we don't deliver it directly ourselves, but we are linked with the services that do. It's something that we always push. It's something that that colleagues at responsible authorities do, so like safeguarding. There's the Drug and Alcohol Teamed Act. There's, who else is there? I'm tripping myself up.
I mean, there's just a wide range of partners who are involved in it, and we've got enforcement teams that will also get involved if necessary. But we're always looking for feedback, so if there is any evidence that it's not working, that's coming from locally or nationally, we'll look to learn on it. And I know there has been some feedback on it, and we just have to keep promoting it as best we can.
Thanks. Just actually before I come to you, Mary, as soon as it's come up, it's possibly slightly unfortunate that we've got the review of the Nighttime Safety Charter also coming to this committee, but in a few months' time, and obviously not in advance of this, in case that might want to feed into this policy. Are you confident that there's nothing they might ask for that we haven't anticipated in this policy?
I don't think so. Everything that is within the policy has been in agreement, in consultation with all services. Essentially, what like David said, we're governed by national legislation, so we can only we can't dictate anything, but we can only enforce what we can enforce. But in terms of closely linking with other services, it's part and parcel of the building of this policy anyway, to make sure that we can signpost the services linking. We attend the meetings for the Nighttime Safety Charter review as well. So as much as we are limited in terms of what we can or we are supposed to do via the legislation, we certainly feed in and work on a regular basis. So there's nothing been brought up in any of the meetings that we've attended throughout this process that's been a surprise or any major change anyway. So no, I think I'm quite positive that would be fine.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I suppose reflecting, slightly digressing, there's an enforcement side to this as well, isn't there? And I suppose, are we doing enough to make people aware that if, let's say, a nightclub or something is not just not doing Ask for Angela, but is tolerating behaviours on its premises and between customers that it shouldn't be, that can be reported to the service and the potentially licence can be reviewed. I mean, that might be a more to the point than whether they operate some scheme or other. But are people aware of that, and do they make use of it? If they are, I think that's possibly the question we need to ask ourselves. Okay, thank you. Mary.
Yeah, it's just about the legislation. You've talked about national legislation, and it might not come under this, our licensing policy, but there's a lot of, it's about nitrous oxide that's used in food production, and do companies who use that have to have a licence or permissions from anyone? It's because, I'm asking this question because we know it's used as a recreational drug. We know that we get the blue canisters dumped all over the place, and there's no way to dispose of them safely anywhere, and nobody seems to be dealing with that. And I just wondered if that comes anywhere under our responsibility.
It doesn't come under the Licensing Act. It's not something that's within there. There is focus on drug use and premises being aware of drug use and taking as much due diligence as they can to avoid that, and to notify relevant authorities, closely working with the police and that sort of thing. But in terms of actual dealing with it per se, that's not something that comes under our legislation. I don't know, Ian, if you know any more than I do.
Yeah, I think if we get calls of there is use, and I mean there are controls on who can buy it, and you might recall there's been some fairly nasty incidents in the area going back a few years with people involved in the trade on nitrous oxide and supplying it and things like that. So there have been certain controls brought in, but I think we'd liaise with safer communities teams if there were concerns in areas where lots of people were using it, because if they're using it and then they're driving, you know, there's lots of controls there. So I think we'd often see some, outside the Licensing Act, some of the ASB aspects of that. And I know what you mean, particularly where people are often parking up, you get lots of the material. I mean, on one level, you can do them for littering, but I think there's wider issues associated with it as well.
Thank you. So I have a question, and it's, again, perhaps slightly tangential, and it's to do with whether we've ticked all the boxes and whether we've got the enforcement operation in place that we need. It relates to the reports we probably all saw yesterday from the BBC about large chains of effectively illegal mini-marts and operations that involving, you know, ghost owners and transfers of names and so on in order to avoid compliance. And this will obviously, I don't know, some of those locations, if not most of them, would have alcohol licenses potentially, and therefore, you know, we will have a duty to ensure that they're not doing all the things that we saw they were doing. Obviously, many are selling illegal vapes and counterfeit tobacco and potentially to children. May touch more on your area of training standards, Ian, so if you want to touch on that. So I suppose the question is, are we making the demands we need to in this policy that allow us to do the enforcement we might need to do in that kind of area? And then are we actually, you know, in a position to do that enforcement? Do we know to what extent that sort of thing is going on in Sheffield? And, you know, are we on top of it, and what can we do to be on top of it?
Yeah. Okay. So you're absolutely right, Joe, and obviously we saw those articles, and some of you may recall we've had some discussions on that. We are in discussions with South Yorkshire Police on some aspects of that. What I can reassure you is we've got a very effective illicit tobacco and illicit vapes and you know, TS team that you've all heard from the briefings over a number of years that take, you know, considerable steps to crack down on that work. I won't pretend we can close all the places down. There is an element of whack-a-mole going on in terms of some of these premises, and I know members have raised concerns in the past about people flipping businesses where, you know, we take action against one person and then someone else appears, and I think that was featured in the article, wasn't it? I do think it's a national issue, and we are looking at how, and we have raised it recently. I know Ben, for example, had a meeting with central government representatives recently about the High Street and concerns there, and that was something that was raised with them, and they were very interested in our views on that. But you will see that in the policy there's a specific element on that the sale of illicit products is not to be tolerated, and we will undertake licence reviews. What we have found is because of this thing of flipping the licence holder, what we also have to look at is who is the leaseholder on these businesses, and we have had some success in going after the owner of the premises sorry, not the leaseholder, the owner, who is obviously has got a lease, because if the owner actually, if we make it clear to the owner that they are renting the premise to a succession of illegal businesses, well, that's where proceeds of crime legislation comes in. We are fortunate in Sheffield, we do have a financial investigator as part of the team. We work closely with South Yorkshire Police as well and regional authorities. And probably the final thing to say is that we also have a place on the Operation Fortify in Sheffield, which is around organised crime. We have a link officer there in the operational group, and we have the means and ability to map organised crime groups. So if we've got any evidence whatsoever, we will undertake that, and then that, in effect brings a degree more interest into that. But I think nationally, you may have heard me say, I think there is, locally and nationally, there is probably more that needs to be done, because the scale of the things that have been highlighted by the BBC on that report are things that we are seeing.
Thanks. David, do you want to come in on this?
So just to provide a bit of reassurance on some of the things in the BBC report, in that we had a case referred to us this week where a premises was employing people without right to work. That premises no longer has a licence and has a £40,000 fine from the Home Office, so that there are incentives going out in this city to show that we won't tolerate those sorts of things.
Yeah, well, I hope they pay the fine. It doesn't get set to zero. I think it was what one of the services offered him, that the BBC uncovered, that people get you out of your fines. But yes, no. So thank you for that. I've forgotten where I was going with that then. Okay, so, all right. Okay, let's move on. Any further comments, questions on this policy? All right, can we take it as agreed? I'll take silence at the end of the meeting. Yes, okay, thank you, that's agreed. Can we just take I know we've got 45 minutes left in the meeting. Can we just take 5 minutes before we get to the next item? 5-minute break. Thank you. welcome back. Next item is the City Centre Commercial Bin Management Policy. Ben, Alex, want to introduce yourselves and the report? Thank you.
Hi everyone, Alex Wester and I'm Service Manager for Street Scene.
Ben Brassford, Assistant Director of Street Scene Services.
Thanks for having us. I'm here to propose the introduction of a new coordinated policy and pilot scheme for commercial waste storage in the city centre with a future citywide rollout. The proposed policy provides a framework for engaging with businesses first and foremost, and then a structured and coordinated enforcement and escalation policy to try and tackle persistent issues with improper storage of commercial waste and the associated problems that it causes. Onto the why, so problems with commercial waste remain, particularly in hotspot areas, which you'll see set out in the report. In the city centre in particular, redevelopment has changed the sort of how some of these problems manifest with change of use and those types of things. And as the city centre moves towards a more hospitality-based setting, and then also with upcoming recycling legislation, which will increase the number of bins and the complexity of issues that we need to deal with, this policy proposes a way to try and address some of those issues. It is based around and very rooted in supporting businesses to comply with legislation. We've consulted with businesses in the pilot area, which is the pilot area that we've selected is Fargate, Backfields and Carver Lane. We consulted with those businesses who recognise that poor waste practices affect them as much as residents and visitors. So the proposed approach prioritises supporting those businesses to meet requirements, offering guidance and a structured way of liaising with them, and helps them to comply. However, it also proposes that we'll use improved enforcement powers where necessary to ensure that we can tackle issues where persistent issues remain. On to what we're proposing. So the formal policy implementation. So establish a clear policy framework to address commercial waste management, including increasing the expectations that we place on businesses under the legislation. It supports compliance with environmental and highways regulation and better coordination across council services, involving more teams in the process and using the resources that we've got, and sharing information to give us better outcomes, and then obviously reducing the environmental impact from improper waste storage. As I mentioned, so it's a pilot approach with a full rollout after testing. So we're beginning in the areas that I mentioned to refine the policy's impact. That will also allow us to create systems to allow us to share information better and to track progress through the policy, and then expand to a citywide rollout based on lessons learned. And sort of the improved joint working that we developed through that process with services and partners. And then to adopt a structured approach that prioritises supporting businesses to meet legal requirements with enforcement under the Environmental Protection Act, Highways Act where necessary, and the Planning Enforcement Act where appropriate too, using notices, Section 47 notices in particular, and fixed penalty notices under appropriate legislative powers, and then escalation to the Magistrates' Court where council-led enforcement fails. And then, as I previously mentioned, so leveraging resources from city centre ambassadors and colleagues across neighbourhood services to enable coordinated action with officers from multiple teams involved in that business liaison and evidence collection. But with enforcement sitting particularly with the services that are experts. So, for example, environmental enforcement would carry out the enforcement work under the Environmental Act, but they would be supported to gather the evidence and escalate through the process by colleagues in other parts of the service. There are a few future options, and the pilot process will help us develop our understanding of what action we might need to take in future, and obviously we'll bring any future options back. They could be just take no further action other than the policy and the operational changes. If we see great improvement, we could look to assign dedicated resource to monitor and act on commercial waste issues. But obviously there would be financial implications to that option. And we could review the way in which commercial waste is managed in the city. So we have looked at practices across the country, and I think in particular Doncaster have a situation where they provide their own commercial waste collection service and are the biggest provider in the city centre, which gives them more control and provides an income stream option. Obviously that's a much bigger scale project that members may or may not want to pursue, and would take a lot of time to work through that kind of process. So just closing, it's the pilot and the policy gives us a practical evidence-based way towards cleaner, greener and a more attractive city. It aligns with national best practice and lays the groundwork for a citywide rollout with a structured framework from engaging with businesses to enforcement. And I'm happy to answer any questions you've got.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from members? Mark and Mark.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. Really pleased to see that we're doing a suck it and see and a trial approach, see what we can do and learn, lessons learned from that, and see what goes forward from that. It's really good to see an evolution of policy that way, to see what can work. It's 6.4, the bit about enforcement and support. This is the bit that I always kind of struggle with. It's kind of like you decide you're going to set up a business and you don't know how to dispose of your waste and how to act in an appropriate manner. I'm kind of a bit unsure as to what's your thinking on the support we can give to businesses. When do we step in and give that support? Like, are we going to be looking maybe with a licensing team to when a new business establishes and applies for a license, are we getting straight in there with information? Because without having set up a business myself, I can understand that there's going to be a lot of things you're taking into account, just not just paying the bills, but everything else that you're getting involved with. But I'm kind of wondering, where's your thoughts on how this is going to evolve in helping new start-up businesses, certainly in our district areas, and maybe not the city centre bit, maybe I'm being naive there, but certainly in our district areas where you've got more speculative businesses setting up, big turnover. Certainly within my ward, you've got lots of district centres with small businesses coming and going, shops very briefly empty before a new person comes in. So what do you see as the challenges there, and have you got enough resources to make sure you can actually deliver on that element? Because it's that vibrant business and allowing new establishers and new people to come in that I'm really interested in.
Yeah, and I think so. Am I right to answer that question now? Yeah. I know planning have already sort of, I think in the work that precluded the work that I've carried out on this, planning had already started making some progress here in terms of including with new businesses, in particular where there's change of use, the planning conditions within the approvals for that business would include something about proper storage of waste, and will set out particular conditions about the storage. And so that gives us a good starting point for a conversation and helps us. I think where we struggle is perhaps where we've got long established businesses, but the fact that we start in terms of the planning process where it started with a new business, I think we've got good grounds for a positive conversation, because this policy will give us sort of that initial sort of, the conversation's already started at the planning stage, and then when it gets to the stage of us recognising that there's a problem, then the policy lays the groundwork for having a productive conversation and setting out, we'll go and deliver a letter which will say, this is what we expect, and giving very clear sort of signposting to appropriate legislation, but advice on what practical solutions can be offered. And then, we're visiting those businesses and saying, how does this feel for you? Is this something that you think might stand in the way of that? And I've been involved in these conversations myself where, we're saying there aren't enough, we don't have enough space, or, where we are, this is the problem, and we start to look at practical solutions like, you know, can we change the layout of the highway? Can we build a bin store? You know, can you share space with somebody else to store your bins? Or, you know, those types of practical solutions that the policy gives that the framework to have those conversations within.
And if I could, I suppose, just add to that, I mean, you know, we're very lucky in Sheffield in that we've got a network of business advisors that are there to support new businesses and existing businesses to develop. So clearly, you know, this is the type of thing that we'll be sharing with them, and it sets out really clearly what businesses need to think about. So as Alex has said, you know, rather than getting into a difficult situation and then finding problems, you know, they're going to be aware kind of where we're going to from the start. So hopefully making it easier for new businesses to start up.
Anybody else? Oh, Mark. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. I think it's really positive because actually much of the town centre looks fine, but there are still bits that look a little bit grotty, and I think it is the more bin situation than the street cleaning, I think, from my perspective. So I think that's really positive that we're being proactive around it. When are we looking to come back and say, well, this pilot has succeeded here, failed here, whatever it's done, and how do we take it forward? When are we doing that?
I'd propose that we come back in a year when we've got a decent amount of data to sort of say, you know, this is the impact that we've had. It would give us an amount of time to develop a system. I think in terms of like developing that coordinated approach across staff members, across teams, I think part of that will be developing a system to monitor an escalation process, and that it's not. It could be really simple, but often those things aren't simple. They take a little bit of time. I think we've been working with services for quite a long time now already in terms of setting the groundwork for this. So I think that everybody's on board in terms of teams and services that we want to feed in. But I think developing that system and then having a bit of time where we've got time to collect that data and see improvement would be good.
Thank you. Anybody else? Right. Can we move to decision then? Recommendations on page 131. Are those agreed? Take silence as the agreement. Thank you. That is agreed. Thank you for coming. Item 11, Q2 performance monitoring. This is on page, let me find it, 155 in your pack. Follows obviously a piece of work we've done on you know, how we want the performance monitoring presented. You'll see a number of areas rated red, amber and green on the subsequent pages, or in my case, grey, grey and grey. And it's 100% grey, so I don't know, is that good? Is that good or bad? Richard.
Thank you, Chair. This to hopefully help on that this should be a letter of red, amber or green on there as well. So if it is grey, it should say an R or A or a G. I'm not going to read through this verbatim. It's now, I think the sort of the battle river, if you like, of performance monitoring is the maturity of the organisation is getting better. And again, I know I say this at every session. I think for this committee, we are ahead of the curve on performance management. We know it's not perfect. We know it needs to be a smarter dashboard. We are looking at Power BI, etc. So it becomes a proper dashboard, so you can see on a couple of pages with graphs, etc. And we are pushing corporately to be able to be one of the first committees to do that. So unfortunately, it's still a little bit clunky how it's presented on a Word document, but hopefully it gives members a really good overview of where the key areas this committee is responsible for and how we're performing on those. So again, I'm not going to read the report verbatim, but the report provides the committee with an overview of the Environmental Service and Regulation Policy Committee operational performance. And this is for Q2, which is July to September. The report should allow the committee to understand and comment on the performance of a range of services delivered by the City Council and our partners, which fall under this committee's remit. So I'll jump to page 157. Recommendation. It's recommended that the Environmental Services and Regulation Policy Committee notes performance report updated, provided for Q2 of 25-26, agrees to help shape what performance measures make up future reporting. So that is a moving feast. We've already done a big piece of work on a couple of occasions with members of this committee. The most recent one is September, to understand really what's filling your mailboxes and what performance indicators you want to see, and highlights any issues of concern that you may wish to discuss in future performance reports, whether that be at formal committee or on knowledge briefings. And in the pre-agenda, I do apologise. I think we misinterpreted some of the guidance members wanted at that workshop, where we've taken some performance information out of the report because it was to be reported by exception. We need to put that back in just so it's there, so you can see we've still got a grip on that, but we're not reporting by exception. So apologies, that's not in the report. So point 2 on page 158, the purpose of the report summarises performance information for this committee. It is Q2. The report highlights areas of note, providing an explanation where possible, trying to keep it brief but give enough information to allow members to be able to challenge, but also take comfort we've got a grip on this, and to facilitate the committee in monitoring performance or a range of services that falls within its remit. I'll now jump down to page 159 and section 2.9. This report is aimed at establishing regular performance monitoring reporting to committees and forms an important way for members to receive consistent and good quality information. This should strengthen members' regular understanding of service delivery and enable them to understand the wider context, implications, importantly, of policy decisions and assurance of performance grip by the services. Committee reporting will also enable service performance information from across the organisation to be shared in the public domain, increasing transparency and accountability. Moving down to page 159, section 2.15. There is a hopefully useful summary, so again I won't go through Appendix A in detail, but I'm happy to take questions and challenges on some of those indicators. But this summary just gives an highlight of current performance. So more markets footfall, a positive position increase on footfall, which is a number of people going into the market and more market by 7.7% year on year. Occupancy stands at 82%, which is above the national average, so positive growth and performance in more market. However, Crystal Peaks market, slight increase on footfall of 0.5% year on year, but we know that occupancy is quite stagnant at 73%, which is slightly below the target, but still above national average. And members are aware from your briefings within the knowledge briefings and also right at your challenges, we continue to look at promotional activity and branding refresh to really drive footfall into those markets. City centre footfall, now this isn't in this committee's direct control, but it's a good indicator of the work this committee is responsible for alongside colleagues in TRC committee. But you can see overall it's down 5.4% year on year and down 4.9% quarter on quarter. The Moor does remain the busiest location, and as you'd expect, we've got a number of events lined up, delivered by City Centre Management team, which falls within this remit of this committee, but also our major event colleagues, which falls under the TRC committee, to really look at driving footfall, using events to showcase how the city centre is changing and how positive the outlook for the city centre is. Taxi licensing. We know there's an area for improvement in how we monitor and how we report on performance indicators. So we've got a number of indicators there which hopefully are useful, but we're still looking for that. How do we, and it falls alongside general licensing as well, how do we show the 4 areas of licensing responsibility we're delivering those as a service? So that is still work in progress, but hopefully those indicators give you some context around some of that performance. The positives, we've got referrals of 35 licensing subcommittee referrals, which is up from 28 in Q1. Majority of those have been dealt with in a timely process. 100% of taxi licence renewals issued prior to expiry, so that is a tangible performance measure. We've got a statutory duty to deliver that, and that shows that the service have got a grip on that. And vehicle fuel types, again, partly under the influence of the committee, but also under the TRC through the air quality zones. there is a shift, a positive shift towards hybrid electric vehicles, and that's shown to be continuing, especially in the private hire sector.
Richard, can I just stop you there? I mean, you go through the summary on page 160, etc., and expanding on the summary, which, if members have read the full report later on, I think possibly that might not be necessary. I just wondered if maybe we don't need to do that, and maybe we go straight to comments from members, if that's all right. Was there anything else you wanted to say after going through the summary?
No, it's identified in the summary. Apologies on your packs, it might show grey, but as we mentioned, it should be red, amber, green. There are a few ambers on there. The services alongside the ADs are having deep dive sessions with those relevant services to make sure there's a recovery plan. Quite a lot of those ambers are outside our control. It's changes in legislation. It's impacts we're facing from external environment, but we've got a grip on those services, and rightly we're keeping members updated via knowledge briefings where those services are reds or ambers. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Richard. Look, I'll throw it over to members in a second. I'll just observe. I don't want to go over again because we talk about this every time that what we're measuring and how it's presented and so on. We've put a lot of work into that. I think there's a piece of work in terms of the software behind it and so on that is incoming. So let's hold on that until we see that and see what we can do with that. Yes, I mean I noticed the new measure of the uptime of the fast chargers, which is basically 100%, which is great. It's not the fast chargers the problem is, it's the rapid chargers that have always been the problem, and we were aware of it as a problem before we don't have it in the performance monitoring, but if we did, if that was the one you gave us, which is the interesting one, it's something we're already aware of. It raises a question of how this functions as a mechanism to alert us to the problems, doesn't it? So let's reflect on that. Obviously, we are aware of the problems with rapid chargers, and we've discussed them at length in briefings over the years. So yeah, on that note, any comments or questions from members? Mark?
Thanks. 3 points. One, I think the moor does need pulling out because that is a real success story, that. So, yeah, congratulations to everyone who's been involved in that, because I think that doesn't happen by chance. Page 160 in the summary. Food safety, I couldn't find it, so apologies if the answer is in there somewhere, but are we on track to achieve that target of the food safety inspections? So no overdue visits by the year end. And then the second one is, again, maybe one to come back to. It just feels to me we're pretty good at the reactive environmental enforcement. It's the proactive, and I'm thinking particularly in residential areas where you've got the odd house or household that are causing real problems for everyone around because of the way that they fail to manage their property, how we actually use our powers to improve things for residents. And I think there's an area there that we could come back to, probably not as part of this, to think that there aren't many of them, but they cause enormous problems and probably enormous amounts of time, Ian, for your area particularly. And how do we do that in an efficient way?
Okay. In respect of the food work, the expectation is still that we will complete the programme by year end. Quite often there is a bit of rear end of the year loading in that there is a very particular focus in Q4. However, the team have highlighted in some of the commentary here that they are being affected by what seems to be a deteriorating standard again in food businesses. So I think we're now up to about 35 already for the year, which is beyond previous years. So I think this is in terms of closures of food businesses. So something's happening there. There's more businesses struggling. So what we are looking at as a team is how we can get upstream of that, as you've said about the prevention work. What analysis can we do on that in terms of the common factors, often pest control, that they're cutting back on, but how do we get upstream to ensure that more businesses, when they finally get an inspection, have not got such poor standards that they have to be closed. But yeah, broadly we expect to deliver by year end, subject to that sort of reactive work. In respect to your question around the one or two houses, or maybe it could be plots of land that are problems, obviously we've got patch officers, and the expectation will be that if they can't sort it with, you know, regular interventions, that they will escalate that. But what we have identified is that there are sites across the city where individual patch officers are finding it difficult to provide a long-term solution to improving a site because, for example, it might need investment or it might need other agencies to be involved and things like that. So we are trialling and we've got one or two on the go at the minute, a problem profile approach where there's a particularly difficult long-term issue. We're working with some members on that, and that will bring the appropriate people around the table to try and come up with a long-term solution. So that's the type of things we're doing. But I would be concerned if there's one household that is bringing a whole neighbourhood down, and that we should be able to tackle that, working with various partners. I think it's fair to say we are seeing people who are, you know, maybe more people who are struggling, more hoarding cases, you know, people not getting rid of waste, not paying for it to be dealt with properly. So I think we are seeing a lot of demand.
Thanks. Christine.
Yeah, thank you for that. Mine's just a clarification, Neil. The composting you said is down this year, and you implied that it's because of the weather, which is fine. I just wondered, you don't say whether we've maintained or lost numbers of green bins, because that will also impact whether people are not getting green bins or whether there's more people. I just was curious.
Yeah, so this year the green bin numbers are very slightly down, but slightly. I'd have to look at the numbers, but it was around about 22,000 last year, and probably about 500 to 600 down this year. So that's a factor, but the biggest impact has been the dry. So you know, there's been far less growing garden waste. We've seen about 15% reduction from last year. Speaking to other local authorities, that's consistent. Nottingham, Kirklees have lost 20%. Speaking with the other core cities, they're down as well. So we're not alone. It is across the board. And loss of some of the customer base is not helped by the fact we've had the industrial action. So last year, the garden waste service was affected at times. Thankfully, as the industrial action sort of progressed, Viola got on top of that. And since then, since probably February, there haven't been any negative disruptions to the service. But with full service. Yes, absolutely. And we're working with Veolia to introduce some improvements for next year. So it needs to be confirmed, but one of the things we're looking at is a 12-month continuous sign-up. So if you sign up, say, for example, in June, you sign up for 12 months until the following June. Currently, if you don't sign up at the start of the service, you'll end up paying pretty much the same for a fewer number of collections. So that's an ideal opportunity to push it. And obviously with all the comms going out beginning of next year with the recycling changes, we'll absolutely be including the garden waste publicity as well to try and get some more subscribers.
Thank you. Mark.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report and the way you've attempted to present the data here to give us clarity. The one thing I was kind of focusing on, maybe it's just my own perverted obsessions, with the environmental enforcement element of it, 33, 34, 35. I noticed in 34, I'm just checking to make sure I've got that bit right, we've decreased the amount of fixed penalty notices, and that's because of we've lost an operative that was supporting in that role. In terms of the information in here, the only thing that we've got a total number of kind of fly tipping incidents as reported and such like. What I didn't necessarily get the feel of, other than that one comment, was where we are in terms of service capacity and deliverance. Because obviously we can only investigate so many issues if we've only got so many officers. And I didn't get a feeling of where the service is in terms of stress and breaking points. It's one of those things like we increase the amount of fining that we do, the top amount of fining we take, where we've not got enough people to investigate and we've not got enough people to do those fines. Are we really getting the preventative elements that those enforcement actions should be delivering? Are we sufficiently resourced in that element? Are we sufficiently capable in that element? That's maybe something, I don't know whether you could incorporate going forward. Maybe it'd help us make better recommendations for how we support your services and your staff going forward. Hopefully that's an observation that makes sense.
Would you like me to just provide a quick answer on that? I mean, I think we have a briefing next week, and I can make sure that we've put some additional information in the briefing. What we have mentioned here is that because of that issue in terms of we no longer have the agency FPN officers, we're very close to finalising this contract, which is part of this South Yorkshire partnership with Wise and Doncaster. That will provide significant new resource to us, and the evidence of where they've gone down that route with some of the councils is that that's had quite a significant impact. It's for a year initially. There is no cost to SEC, so why wouldn't we? But I think our hope is that that will have some quite significant impacts. So we're quite optimistic about that. In terms of broader work, that's littering and dogfouling. We do have the opportunity to review that when that is up over the year. They also offer a day rate, so that's something we'll be talking to the LACs about, if there are areas where the LACs, with some of their discretionary budget, but where there's low footfall and you'd like a presence, there is that is provided in that contract, so that might provide some other elements. But I'll make sure in the next briefing we pick that up a bit more.
Thank you. Peter.
Thank you. It's about the Bring site. So at the recent briefing, I heard some good news about the reopening of a waste collection at Bring site. I'd just like to hear a little bit more about that, whether there's been any announcement for the public yet.
There hasn't as yet, so we're working with Veolia to open further Bring sites, hopefully next month, but that needs to be confirmed. We've currently got one Bring site open in the city, and we've identified a priority list of 5 sites and 10 sites, and that's currently with Veolia to basically have the internal discussions to make sure that if we are going to reopen the sites, they're confident that they can resource them. What we don't want to do is reopen a site only not to have the resources available, and then there's service failures, etc. So Veolia and members of the waste management client team will be going out to the various supermarkets, because that's where the priority sites are, main sites, just to touch base with the supermarkets, talk to the supermarket managers, and then explain to them that we're looking to reopen them. So within the next couple of weeks, I will be able to be in a position to provide you with an update on where that is and more clarity.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any more hands. Good. So just one observation on the taxi licensing vehicle fuel types. Again, still showing progress towards hybrid and electric and away from diesel, which is good. I think it's particularly good because we did take a slight risk with our previous change to the age limits on vehicle fuel types, that we relaxed the diesel standard a little bit for when it was Clean Air Zone compliant for entirely good reasons. While also obviously relaxing the standards further for electric and hybrid. But there was a risk that might have turned around. Now, obviously, the trend overall is towards electric and hybrid, which we welcome. That might have alerted us that maybe we'd made a mistake with that. Maybe the figures would be even better if we hadn't done that, but maybe there'd been other problems. But that's the sort of thing that monitoring like this needs to be able to pull out. I don't need to reply on that, it's just an observation. But obviously, I guess we'll come back to vehicle ages again before too long, so it's something to bear in mind. If that's it from members, we can finish on time, which is excellent. The mathematical pedant in me, when it saw page 176, I must say, when it says we've resurfaced 474,000 metres of carriageway and also 474,000 square metres of carriageway, led me to think that maybe we were doing it all in 1 metre wide strips. I don't suppose that is the case. But on that note, can we accept this report? It's a recommendation to note and obviously to keep under review and to comment as required. Can we agree those recommendations? I'm seeing nods. Thank you very much. I think that concludes the meeting. So thank you everybody for attending. Thank you to those at home who've watched it. I hope you've had a good time and see you next time.